Have you ever pulled up to the drive-thru at Tim Hortons or Starbucks for the self-proclaimed coffee or tea snobs among us, and reached for your wallet only to be told that the car in front of you had already paid for your order? It's a surprising and beautiful moment that can change the entire course of your day. Now, one could easily take the free drink, move on, and forget about it completely. But that's not the goal, is it? Most of the time, the intention of the driver in front of you is that you would enjoy your free drink, but then pay it forward. It doesn't have to be right then, or even that day. But at some point, the idea is that you will do the same for someone else. A chain reaction of random acts of kindness. Smiles brought to strangers' faces. Moods brightened. Days changed. Just because someone first did the same for you. All of our readings this morning have an element of paying it forward. No, you didn't miss the part where the authors paid for someone's order at Tim Hortons. Don't worry. We don't hear about any random acts of kindness. But what we do hear about are random acts of testimony. People sharing their stories, publicly praising, or openly telling others about Jesus. And just as in our example a moment ago, these moments of sharing can change not only a person's day, but their entire life. Now, this isn't the part where we should all be saying, "Oh, well, isn't that nice?" On the contrary, this is the moment where many of us are probably beginning to feel a little bit uncomfortable. You see, the scriptures aren't just stories for us to read from the comfort of our pew on Sunday, or our favorite chair at home as a bedtime story. It is a living, breathing book meant to challenge and teach us, demanding that we participate, not as a passive listener, but that we actively engage in our role in the grand narrative. We see this starting with the Old Testament reading. In verse 6, Isaiah says, "It is too small a thing for you to be my servant. I will make you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth." Now, this is spoken in reference to Jesus, the suffering servant. However, we know that as Christians, we are called to reflect this, to be Jesus with skin on for everyone around us. It isn't enough to just be a servant. We need to be a light, to bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Now, we don't do the saving. Let's be very clear about that. But we are the ones who can show and tell people about the salvation available to them. Psalms like the one we had this morning are some of my favorites. David is not at all afraid to tell it like it is. If we were to continue reading, we would see that things are not good right now. As happens numerous times throughout the book of Psalms, David laments his struggles and begs for God to help. But, and this is a very important but, through it all, he starts and ends with praise. We have more time spent on praising God for the things that God has done than we have dwelling on the current struggles. David speaks of the new song, the hymn of praise, and says, "Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord." David's experience of God's goodness moves him to praise. Others see this and are moved to faith. How often do we let ourselves get caught up in the negatives, the struggles in our lives, and lose sight of all of the amazing blessings? When was the last time you spoke a positive word about God instead of a negative word about life? We live in a culture that loves to complain. and it's only natural for us to do the same. But have you ever seen a negative advertising campaign that worked? I haven't. God never says that we won't struggle, but God does say that we won't have to go through those struggles alone. And that is something worth sharing and worth hearing. So now we come to the perfect example of someone with something worth sharing. John the Baptist. This was a man with a ministry, a reputation, a following. That said, his mission, and he chose to accept it, foretold in Isaiah, was ultimately to pave the way for Jesus. It was through John's ministry and testimony that Jesus' ministry began. In this particular passage, we have John telling his followers about Jesus. It's him. This is the guy, the one I've been telling you about. Now, I don't know if you caught it, but John had disciples of his own, men whom he had baptized and taught. They hear John proclaim, "Look, the Lamb of God." And just like that, they go following after Jesus. John's own disciples left him to follow Jesus because of what John had told them. He lived his life in such a way that his word had meaning, and all he had to do was say, "Look, there he is," and his people followed. Not only that, but Andrew immediately goes home and tells his brother Simon that they have found the Messiah. And his brother goes too. Random acts of testimony. Even Jesus gets in on it. He renames Simon Cephas, which we know as Peter. The Greek form of Peter is Petros, which means rock. Now, this renaming isn't a testimony to who Simon Peter is. He certainly wasn't a rock. He was impulsive and unstable. No. This name is a testimony to who he will become by God's grace. Through the book of Acts, we are able to see that Peter became one of the pillars of the early church, changed by grace, changed by faith, all made possible by the testimony of others. Imagine if his brothers had never come home and said, "Hey, bro, we found him. You gotta come." What if John had never preached of Jesus' imminent arrival and then never been bold enough to say, "Look, the Lamb"? Would anyone have ever followed? Think about your own faith journey. Did any of you wake up one morning with a sudden revelation about God's existence? Probably not. Though if you did, come talk to me after, because I want to hear that story. It's probably a good one. No, the vast majority of us probably came to faith because someone told us about God and or Jesus. More than that, they probably lived their life in such a way that we actually believed what they were saying. We trusted them. They had a good reputation. We saw something in them that was different than everyone else. They told us, we believed, and we were changed. That change is the key. In his first letter to the Corinthians, Paul says, "Our testimony about Christ was confirmed in you." In other words, Paul's preaching about Jesus was believed, and their changed lives proved it to be true. The proof is in the pudding. Mere words are hollow if they aren't supported by action. If what we say about God doesn't match up with what we do, with how we live, then we will have a negative influence on our disciples. And yes, we all have disciples. We all have people around us upon whom we have an influence, positive or negative. Children, parents, siblings, co-workers, friends. Someone is always watching. We all pass up opportunities to testify for Jesus by what we say and do, or what we don't say and do, every single day. This is a daunting thought, but it's not as scary as it seems. I was always afraid to speak of my faith with strangers because I didn't want people to judge me. Maybe it's because the only image I had in my head of evangelism was those crazy street corner preachers. You know the ones. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of us should pick up a megaphone and start thumping people over the heads with Bibles. Please don't. That would be quite off-putting and have rather the opposite effect that we're after here. Indeed, the best testimony is a life well lived for God. Do more than you say, and people will start to wonder and ask. They will notice that something is a little different about you, and they just might be changed because of it. So today, I want to challenge us all to live our very lives as a testimony to the living God who has saved us by grace so that we may show that grace to others. May our thoughts, words, and deeds be glorifying to God as we shine God's light in the world. Let us lift each other up in prayer as we seek the opportunities to live out this testimony by God's grace for God's glory, so that all may come to know God's love and salvation. May we never pass up an opportunity to testify